Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and welcome to CTO Talk. I am your host, Matt Ferrari. On this 30-minute program, we are going to discuss the issues, challenges, and opportunities that are impacting healthcare technology. You can follow the show at hashtag CTO Talk or follow me at MP Ferrari. For this episode, I'm going to be talking with Scott Maurice, a managing partner of Avail Partners, and we're really excited to have him with us today. We're going to be talking about a lot of the trends that are actually going on in healthcare. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Absolutely. Would you mind giving me a little bit about your background?
Sure. I have been in technology for, about 21 years now. I started very early in my career while I was still in school. And it was actually not my first choice. My first choice was to go into finance, and I did that as well. I was a stockbroker back in New York, and had the whole Gordon Gekko bullpen Wall Street experience. And I developed very early on. I developed a distinct distaste for that kind of environment, the high pressure sales. Without any sort of significant value being commuted. So that was sort of the start, and I very quickly discovered I had a long time affinity for technology, and quickly discovered within the financial industry that there was a lot of technology that was starting to drive a lot of decisions, and that sort of launched my technological career as an engineer. And that was back in, I'm going to date myself. It was back in 1996 that started. And so from engineer through multiple companies, we had a great time building networks all across the globe, building networks for Microsoft and American Express and the Department of Defense, and a ton of networks for enterprises that were also really gratifying experiences. I developed a very specific engineering discipline as it relates to technology, and that served me well. And having a bit of financial background and a mathematics background has also helped me very well, especially transitioning from an engineering role into more of a technology management role. And I've held several of those posts and exited after a stint at Microsoft in 2005. And really became a full-time consultant. And that was also really gratifying. Avail is my second sort of consulting venture. The first was definitely more of a systems integrator, hands-on, more engineering-centric role. But I'm really enjoying the work that we do at Avail. And again, it was the first time I sort of ran into that high-pressure, no-value sales environment as a stockbroker. My answer was to just depart the environment. But after having been in IT management and then as a consultant, and then even operating on the sales side as a solutions architect, I ran into the same sort of high-pressure sales, low-value sales environment in the technology industry. My response this time has been to co-found Avail and combat that actively.
Excellent. That's quite a journey. And you talked about value, and actually value has been on my mind quite a bit recently as kind of healthcare IT transforms to cloud. And would love to know a little bit more about Avail. Would you mind giving me, what is Avail's mission, and what are you guys really out there to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that I love to talk about. Avail is, we started in 2012. I co-founded the company with my business partner, Dan Marsh. And at the time, just before that, we had been working together for a couple of years at a managed services company. And he was one of the sales guys, and I was one of the solutions architects. And we ended up working together quite a lot. And the origin story is funny because we ended up sharing a sales office. A lot of folks on our respective teams worked from home, but just, this is up in Seattle, and just based on where he lived and where I lived, it was more convenient to come into the office for each of us than to work from home. And so we shared this office, fairly large office, by ourselves day in and day out. And we would go out to clients and talk about what their needs were and how we could potentially help them, and what the business was like and how they were, what their objectives were to drive forward. And we kept coming back to this overwhelming sense of, gosh, this is a solution set that requires more than what we have to sell. It requires a little bit of, a SaaS platform, or there's also something that we could use from this, data storage platform over here, or a little bit of a BI solution that we read about that, we don't sell, but it's available. And if the customer used it, gosh, that would really help to drive their business. And so we would write these ideas up on, the whiteboards that were around the office. And we ended up, these movable whiteboards, we ended up surrounding ourselves with whiteboards full of ideas for how to help our clients' businesses. And didn't really know what we were going to do with it until one day one of the sales executives, called ahead and, hey guys, I'm in Seattle. I'm headed up to the sales office. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And we sort of looked around at all the whiteboards and realized, oh my God, we've got to take pictures of this and erase it all before we get into trouble. And that was the moment where we realized that, gosh, this is our biggest impediment to realizing some of these things and really adding value to our clients' businesses is the company that we're working for. And so we built Avail specifically to help executives achieve their mission. And we wanted to be free and unencumbered to tell them the truth, to provide clarity around what their options were, and also to be a bit more inspirational than we were seeing come from other consultants or come from other sales organizations or even from internal IT resources. We wanted to inspire leaders that there is a possibility and you can seize it, and it's not above your head and it's not too complicated for you to grasp. It is simple, it is accessible, it is straightforward, and it's centered around your objectives, not around some technology or some platform that is orthogonal to your business entirely.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think often about how healthcare organizations are trying to move to cloud or to do an electronic medical record migration or build a population health app. And it's pretty clear organizations like Avail are trying to take a look at the longer road, the business value, the IT strategy, if you will. And I wanted to talk about that a bit. As you think about some of the consultancy services that Avail offers out there, how do you map those back to healthcare, or what kind of services does Avail offer that would be really valuable as healthcare organizations think about their cloud journey?
Healthcare organizations, much like every other organization out there, has to think about their own objectives. What goals are they attempting to reach? And a lot of times they are distracted from clearly articulating what their goals are because they are mired down in day-to-day operations, whether that is technological or not. They sort of have the blinders on. They're inside of this system. They're living it on a daily basis. The number one thing that Avail can help with from that perspective is allowing the customer to get out of their day-to-day environment and think about their business more objectively. And I say more objectively, not completely objectively, but giving them the freedom to think maybe a little bit radically about what some of the opportunities are and what's available to them, and to let go of some of the constraints that they're often presented with. In healthcare, it's often that you have a couple of strategic objectives that are in conflict with each other given the current context, and I'll give you an example. One common objective of a healthcare organization is to improve patient outcomes. Another common objective of a healthcare organization, like every other organization, is to drive revenue. And so given a particular environment, certainly given, and I'll speak about the technology, given the given the present technology environment in a hospital or medical organization, oftentimes those things can be in conflict with one another. I need more technology so that I can get data faster to the hands of medical professionals so that we can more effectively benefit a patient outcome. But all of those things cost money, and they require time, and there's compliance issues that we have to deal with about how much we work with data, and all of that costs more money. And now I am, apparently the obvious, air quotes, solution is 8 times or 10 times more expensive, and now I really can't drive any revenue or do the business to achieve this patient outcome. And so how do you deal with these things that are in conflict? And this is, again, where Avail comes in from a technological standpoint to help clients realize that there's a solutions optimization component that may allow you to refine the technological process or refine the technology that you're using, or even eliminate some tasks in the workflow or some technologies that are part of the workflow today because they are left over from a previous era. And in doing so, you end up with, gosh, I do have a way to technologically deliver a solution that can positively affect the patient outcome, but I can do it in such a way that it is efficient, it is cost efficient, it is time efficient, it is straightforward for non-technical people that may be healthcare workers that are not programmers and aren't going to go into in-depth training on this. It's intuitive. There is a way to do that, but without understanding the market and the technologies that are available and doing consistent research on that like Avail does, clients are often hard-pressed, especially in healthcare where they often have conflicting objectives. Clients are hard-pressed to understand what those opportunities are and what those possibilities are as a result.
Yeah, no, that absolutely is top of mind for me as well. And, speaking of benefits, kind of switching gears to the technology side, on the topic of public cloud, Scott, what do you see as primary key drivers or benefits to healthcare organizations as they think about adoption?
Well, the key driver for any organization to move from one modality of delivering something to another is, or should be, I think that it drives competitive advantage, that it is more efficient to do it that way. Cost effectiveness can be good too. It's not to be overlooked. I would probably list it third, as I have. The public cloud is a great boon and also a fantastic trick. The fact of the matter is that any of the common Amazon, Google, Microsoft, any of the other cloud virtualization platforms that are out there, they are not cloud until you incorporate the people that are going to help you drive it, because it is a whole different set of skills and expertise and knowledge to operate a air quote cloud environment than it is to operate an environment based on physical hardware. We've sort of had as an industry a long time, at least a couple of decades, to figure out how we deploy a shrink-wrap piece of application software onto a physical server and stand that up in an environment that's conducive to its health. And everybody sort of knows how to do that now. Whereas in the public cloud space, it's not necessarily true yet. Another part of that big trick is understanding that a Google Cloud or a Amazon Web Services or even an Azure instance or environment, a lot of the cloud providers, Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft, and others, should be likened to the hardware vendors that we're accustomed to. HP, Nimble Storage, Cisco, the hardware manufacturers, where they deployed a physical machine that you could add workloads to. Now it is a utility that is being deployed somewhere outside of your four walls that you deploy a workload to. And the flexibility that you get from that is not just the economy of scale, but also the scale of the technology. It can be revised more frequently, and it can be put together in various ways that create more complex platforms. it was not possible. There's no physical analog to something like a Lambda, where you can write code and have it executed in the cloud without any sort of a server construct. There's really not a physical analog to an Amazon, a Google BigQuery. There just aren't physical analogs to this. So there's a lot of newness. There's a lot of new possibilities. There's a lot of new opportunity. And I think as specifically as healthcare organizations move forward and think about their journey to use and leverage some of these technologies, it really should be with the end in mind. What are they hoping to achieve that they previously couldn't, and that perhaps now they can?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who may just be tuning in, we are talking with Scott Maurice, Managing Partner of Avail Partners. I'm Matt Ferrari of CTO Talk. We're talking now about how to kind of build a healthcare IT strategy with cloud in mind. Scott, I'm curious, you've had the opportunity to assess many healthcare organizations around their IT strategy kind of from the inside. I'd love to know, in your mind, what technology tracks or lessons learned have you seen come up as trends, and what kind of advice would you give a healthcare business leader that's listening in?
First, I would encourage you that you may be looking at your own environment and thinking about the problems that you have. I have had some business leaders express to me that, gosh, we've got to get this handled before we can think about moving to the cloud. And there's some professional embarrassment sometimes, or I would just encourage you that you are not alone. The problems that you are facing, the things that you lament technologically, they are the same things that everyone else in your position laments and has to deal with. It is incredibly common. And it's not necessarily very complex. They're not earth-shattering issues with, gosh, I've really got to get, an EHR that uses artificial intelligence and manages data with, blockchain verification so that I can make my doctors faster. That's a lot of buzzwords thrown into one sentence that may or may not have strategic value for your organization. But what you're probably agonizing over, and what I've seen in my practice, is folks really struggle with the basics. Silly things like, we have an internal data center that just isn't up to snuff in one regard or another. Physical security is lacking, or the physical assets there are, fail their update cycles, or we have a problem keeping up to date with hardware and software. We have a problem keeping up to date with our backup and recovery procedures, or our business continuity and disaster recovery methods. We have a problem with email. We have a problem with licensing. We have a problem with access control, where we're not quite sure if we've cleaned up our directory to know that we've got all the right people in the right places, or that have access to the right things. A lot of uncertainty, a lot of unsurety, a lot of insecurity around those things. They're very basic. Everybody has to deal with them. And so that's the advice that I'd give is take a good, and this is what we do with our clients, we help them to take a good, strong look at what is really core to running this healthcare organization, and what is a commodity that, while it may be very comfortable for me, or while I may like it or have affinity for it, or I'm just used to it perhaps, that it's been done this way and I really don't necessarily want to let go of it or change it. Does letting go of it or changing it or eliminating it provide you with greater velocity for your organization, or help you move your agenda forward? And those are some of the tough decisions that are, oftentimes they're very cultural in nature. And those are the decisions that we help our clients to look at and evaluate and make.
Right. Okay. Well, you mentioned blockchain in there, and obviously that's a hot topic for healthcare IT organizations that are really looking to transform. I love kind of your thoughts on any of kind of the three big trends that I'm hearing in my conversations every day, which is really around driving healthcare outcomes out of AI or artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and you mentioned some of those options right off the bat, and blockchain. How do you see that from your role? How do you see that affecting healthcare organizations?
All of those technologies can have a tremendous impact on a lot of different industries, in particular in healthcare, where privacy is such a concern. And we have this, it's one of the stark examples where we want to maintain privacy at all costs, but we also often have a frequent need to share information. And so absolutely, blockchain and artificial intelligence, how do I maintain veracity of a transaction or of data? And then how do I work with that data in interesting ways and combine it with other things? The privacy elements go into, when do I de-identify data and when do I not? Can I do that dynamically? When you talk about data platforms, how do I micro-contract and say that, I do want some of this data to be shared at certain times with certain people and others I don't. And that allocation is going to change dynamically. These are huge privacy concerns. These are huge, and a lot of those things that are concerns can be alleviated with some of these technologies. Right? I can use artificial intelligence to help me decipher through the use case for when I enact certain privacy controls and when I don't. I can use blockchain to maintain veracity of data. I can use, big data analytics platforms like BigQuery and Redshift and Power BI. I can use them to sort through my data and make predictions or analyze outcomes and things of that nature. My advice to anyone seeking to do any of these things is or looking at how do I incorporate this into my platform is find an expert. Find a whole team of experts. Because again, back to that core and commodity conversation, some of these things are absolutely vital to moving forward. There's a particular electronic health record that has to work with a particular analytics platform, and there's a particular piece of proprietary software that this researcher is using, or perhaps that researcher has developed where they need to force that interaction, create that interaction, do it in a compliant way, do it very, very quickly, and do it for myriad use cases which may change over time. Find experts. Find experts to help you develop your platforms. Find experts to help you migrate data source from one place to the next. Find experts who are going to monitor and operationalize any of these platforms or environments for you, because it is non-trivial to develop that sort of intellectual property that leverages these technologies in the first place. All of the other operations that go along with it to operationalize that application or set of applications once they are put into an environment and stood up, those things are, that's the part that you can, get off your plate. It's also the part that's going to be non-differentiated. Right? It's not going to specifically drive either a patient outcome or revenue for your organization. So find experts to help you with those pedestrian tasks. They are still complex, but they are very straightforward. If they're not going to add strategic value to your organization, then you should get them off your plate.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a conversation I'm having with mainly hospitals or providers often, is how can they focus on providing benefit to their patients, their doctors, their nurses, their practitioners. As we wrap up today, Scott, I'd love to know, I'm sure you're busy growing Avail, but I'm curious to know your own technology interests in your spare time. What recent technologies have you been dabbling in, or really what piques your interest?
I do have a couple of things that have piqued my interest lately in the technology world, and not the least of which is our good friend, the Bitcoin. There are now all sorts of alternative coins out there that are using different mechanisms and different ledger systems. They all have the fundamental, underpinnings that Bitcoin elucidated for us. But I think it's fascinating, the concept of a decentralized currency. If you can have a decentralized currency, what else can you decentralize and still have data surety with. So I find that interesting on a number of fronts. One, because it's an application that I think everyone can sort of grasp the utility of using a coin of any type, versus the protection against the veracity of, is this coin valuable? So going back to biting that gold coin with your teeth, seeing if it bends or not. This is sort of the modern day equivalent of that. And the technologies that are required in order to keep you safe and in some cases keep you anonymous, and where those things break down, I think that's fascinating.
So that is really interesting. I was and this wasn't planned. I was on a plane about a week and a half ago, and I was reading an article that MIT just put out around healthcare blockchain and who's going to build out a decentralized database. And the article was talking about EMRs in Boston, and that in the city of Boston alone there are, I can't remember, it was like 24 or 26 different EMRs just in Boston alone, and really talking about healthcare as an industry first needs to buy in before the technology is even viable. But the potential for blockchain and for Bitcoin to somehow coalesce, or those concepts, is so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's even an interesting question, right, when you think about who's going to build the decentralized model.
Right.
Well, it's decentralized. A lot of people are going to have to build it.
Absolutely. Thank you for talking with me today, Scott, and for all the listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. If you have a comment about today's episode, check out and follow #CTO Talk on Twitter, or follow me at MT Ferrari. You can learn more about CTO Talk at healthcarenowradio.com or at cleardata.com. And I am Matt Ferrari. Until we speak again, have a good week, everyone.